Thank you. Aha! Can dyslexics read? Fascinating question, really interesting question. The answer, of course, is yes, but of course reading instruction needs to be specific and it needs to be structured. One of the issues with dyslexia is when you see letters and words on a page, they don't naturally translate into sounds in your head. And so you need to be able to allow dyslexics to understand the relationship between the words and the sounds. And that can be done with thorough orthographic instruction. Beautiful. Ah, yes. Can dyslexics read books? Yes, but it usually takes us a long time to do it. I love reading books, I really do, but it takes me so long. And the number of people who'll give me a book as a gift, and I look at it and I'll think, thanks very much, but I'll never get around to reading it because it's that thick, and I know that it's going to take me a couple of years to read it. I read Frankenstein recently, really good book. Took me a year and a half to read it. And that's partly because I'm a slow reader, but also because this feeling of it's daunting to pick up a book and read it. So unless I have to read a book, I need to be really motivated. Excellent. Can dyslexics learn to spell? One of the hardest things about being dyslexic is that spelling is really tricky. Yes, we can learn to spell with the correct instructions. We can learn to spell when we're given structured teaching. We can also learn to spell if we're given instruction in morphology. That is the different parts of words and how they go together. But actually, because it's not obvious to people with dyslexia what the different letters sound like, if you want us to write a word like thorough, and then you've got this jumble of there's a T, there's an H, there's an O, there's an R, there's an O, U, G, H. These don't necessarily sound like you might expect them to sound, and especially for people with dyslexia. Translating the sounds, or translating the letters, the graphemes in other words, into phonemes, into sounds can be difficult. And so learning to spell in a language like English especially is really hard. English is what we call orthographically deep or orthographically opaque, which means when you see a letter, it's not obvious what that letter sounds like. So an obvious example is the letter G. Does it sound like G or J? It can sound like either of those in a word. And so we need correct instruction to help us understand how to spell these, how to put them together, so that we can spell consistently and correctly. Thank you. Can dyslexics read music? Fascinating question. So on the one hand, yeah, where dyslexics find it tricky to understand the sounds of letters on a page, transferring the sounds of letters or translating the sounds of letters into sounds in their heads. Similarly, it can be problematic for people with dyslexia to translate essentially squiggles and notes on a page of sheet music into the sounds in their heads. At the same time, a lot of the time when people test for dyslexia, not all the time, but a lot of the time, they test for something called visual processing, and part of this visual processing is the ability to place things in a sequence or to locate things in a sequence. So maybe to locate a letter in a string of letters, or to place a word in a word string, something like that. Now, if you're trying to read musical notation, this can be quite difficult, especially if you have these sequencing issues. And so reading music can be quite challenging. Playing music, on the other hand, has different challenges. Thank you. Can dyslexics play piano? Great question. Well, I'm dyslexic and I can't. And some of the reasons that I can't play piano actually is that I have dyspraxia as well, so there are sequencing issues. So, for instance, I have left and right. It's difficult for me to coordinate my left and right for playing piano. So I've taken up the trombone because it's just that and it's a lot easier for me. So there are sequencing issues, there are motor control issues, gross motor control issues. That is essentially controlling your left and your right at the same time. And then fine motor control issues. This is your fingers, being dexterous with your fingers. There are also other issues that people with dyslexia and dyspraxia might have, which includes keeping time. So keeping time might be quite difficult for people with dyslexia or dyspraxia. Other things. So we already discussed whether dyslexics can read music, and there may be issues with reading music, and there are clearly issues with being able to look at a sheet of paper with these strange notes on them, these squiggles, these dots, and know what that means in terms of playing them on the piano. So it can be difficult. But having said that, a number of dyslexics have been great piano players. The stories even go that Mozart and Beethoven may have been dyslexic, although there is of course no way of knowing. Can dyslexics drive? Well, first of all, teaching someone with dyslexia to drive, you need to understand how to teach dyslexics almost anything. So try not to rely on working memory, that kind of thing. If a dyslexic has to learn the highway code, that person perhaps shouldn't just read through the highway code. There should be other ways of doing it. And these days there are audio books, and there are scanning pens and readers to help you. And there's computer programs. Other things that dyslexics might struggle with is sequencing. So left and right. If you're driving with a dyslexic and you say turn left, don't be surprised if that person goes right. And at the same time, one of the big things for dyslexics learning to drive is road signs. Can you read a road sign clearly and easily? Can you judge distance? Can you see how quickly another car is coming towards you? And can you read the speed limit on a road sign? So reading road signs and then judging distance, these can be quite difficult, especially for people with dyslexia and also dyspraxia. So dyspraxia can affect your understanding of left and right and your spatial awareness as well. Can dyslexics claim PIP, P-I-P? So for people who don't know what PIP is, personal independence payments. Essentially these are to help people live an independent life. The British Dyslexia Association estimates that around about 4% of the population may be dyslexic to the point of it being some form of disability, whatever we call a disability. And the relationships between having a disability and being able to claim PIP are not clear, obviously. They're not as one-to-one as we perhaps like them. But yes, generally speaking, a number of dyslexics will be eligible to claim PIP if they're 16 or over. Although, for anybody who's had to wrestle with administration and claim forms, you might want to ask somebody to help you do it. Okay, thank you very much. I think that should just about do it. Thank you.